Hello, and welcome to Data-Driven Excellence Tools for Implementation Success. I'm Georgia McKown, and I'll be walking you through opportunities to collect data to guide your function-based thinking with your students. Before we get started, I want to give you a moment to reflect on what you think of immediately when you hear the term data. You can pause the video here and think and reflect. I know data can be overwhelming. That's why I'm going to talk you through some systematic ways you can collect data in your classroom or with the teachers you lead to get the most out of your efforts. Specifically, we're going to focus on how you can collect individual and classroom level data to apply function-based supports. For this session's agenda, we're going to work through three guiding questions. Why do we collect data? How can we collect data? And how can we use the data we collect to guide practice? Together, these help to streamline data collection and make it super practical for your daily work. Let's begin with why we collect data. We collect data because they help to tell a story. Data provide context for what's happening around a behavior, like what happens before, during, and after. Data also provide information about a learning or home environment and how the people and things in those environments may impact behavior. They establish a baseline or a starting point for the behavior we're trying to improve. They tell us what's going on at a specific point in time, and they show us patterns we may not notice at isolated points. Data informs strategic support. When we can see behavior patterns in data, we can be strategic about what we do before, during, and after that may reinforce a more appropriate behavior. And finally, data demonstrate progress. When we're intentional about tracking behavior data, we can get a more concrete understanding of when our efforts are working and when we need to make adjustments. Collecting and reviewing data regularly is critical to understanding and maximizing our supports to promote positive behavior. Often when we think about data, people are only thinking about numbers in a spreadsheet, but the function-based thinking user guide has many different points to guide your work. The gathering information section on pages 7 through 10 asks you to think about a student's behavior and experiences. And the family input section on pages 20 through 25 asks you to talk with families about their experiences and strengths to build relationships and work together to promote positive behavior. The observation data and behavior patterns sections ask you to observe student behavior and consider patterns in when, where, and how it may be happening. These establish a baseline and clearly organize what's happening at your starting point. The strategic planning section on page 13 asks you to consider what you could do before, during, and after a behavior to promote and reinforce a replacement behavior. And the treatment fidelity section provides a tool for understanding if and when your strategies are working to influence behavior. The data printable offers you a convenient way to take observation data and monitor the use of your strategies on a daily basis right on your clipboard. And the data tracking sheet offers you a way to enter that data into an interactive Google Sheet that will create charts for you to visualize your progress. These resources were intentionally designed and included in the user guide to make data tracking natural and convenient and part of how you support student behavior. All right, I've done a lot of talking about why we collect data. Now I want you to stop and reflect. In which area do you think you need the most help tracking behavior data? Providing context, establishing a baseline, informing strategic support, or demonstrating progress? After you pick one, what do you think you're missing or need more help with to get more comfortable with that specific area? You can stop the video and reflect here, and then keep an eye out for that as you're moving through the rest of the video. A primary area that many folks are uncomfortable with is collecting observation data at nearly any stage in the function-based thinking process. I want to walk you through 4 primary ways you can collect behavior data in your classroom: rating, frequency, duration, and latency. The function-based thinking user guide has a template for each of these that you could print out, and there's space to record them on the data tracking handout as well. We'll start with rating. You would use a rating scale to collect observation data if you're measuring the student's behavior using a standardized scale. You prepare the scale ahead of time, defining what would fit into each of the possible ratings. You use this when you're already tracking the contextually inappropriate behavior or the replacement behavior, And an example would be Marzo's teacher rated their on-task behavior a 3 on a 10-point scale. You can also use frequency. Frequency is measuring the number of times the student engages in the behavior during an observation period. You use this when the behavior has an obvious or discrete beginning and end. An example would be Lori cursed 6 times in a 30-minute period, a rate of 0.2 curses per minute. Many of these data strategies encourage you to observe for the same interval or amount of time in each session. But you can also calculate rate by dividing the number of observations by the number of minutes if your observations vary in length. This is really helpful if you want to compare data over time if you're not able to always observe for the same amount of time. Additionally, you can collect duration data, measure how long a behavior occurs. And this is really helpful when you can observe for the entire session. For example, Claire was out of her assigned work area for 14 minutes. And finally, we have latency. With latency data, you're measuring the time that occurs between an antecedent and when the behavior begins. You use this when a behavior has a clear beginning. For example, after prompted to begin working, Courtney took 5 minutes before she started working. So the antecedent is that prompt to begin working, and then there's latency between the antecedent and when the behavior of Courtney actually starting to work occurs, and that latency was 5 minutes. So now that we've talked through why we collect data and how we can collect data, let's talk about how the data we collect can inform how we support students. So in the beginning, we collect data. The data tell us about the context of the behavior and patterns around how, when, and where it occurs. And this helps us to hypothesize the function of the behavior. In other words, what is the student accessing or avoiding as a result of the behavior? Once we have a hypothesized function, we can identify a replacement behavior that meets the same function. For example, a student who shouts out during whole group instruction for peer and teacher attention may have appropriate attention seeking, like raising a hand, as their replacement behavior. Once we've identified a replacement behavior, we can start to identify strategies that we as the educators can take to promote the replacement behavior before, during, and after it occurs. We'll then move to data collection again to see if our strategies are working. If they're not, we can use our new data to make adjustments to the hypothesized function, the proposed replacement behavior, or our function-based supports as needed. The data we collect help us to develop informed strategic support. The guiding questions in Part 2, Develop a Strategic Function-Based Support, and the Function-Based Thinking User Guide really help to guide you in using the contextual and observational data you've collected to develop supports. They focus on what you can do to promote positive behavior, teach discrete skills, and reinforce contextually appropriate behavior in a way that matches the function of the original behavior. For example, if a student was shouting out during whole group instruction to gain teacher and peer attention, and they successfully raise their hand and wait to be called on, demonstrating the replacement behavior, how will you reinforce this behavior? You may reinforce the behavior by allowing them to tell a joke while the class lines up for lunch, so that they still have an opportunity to access the teacher and peer attention in a more appropriate way. In other instances, your data may tell you that you need resources and materials from other school team members, like the SLP or school counselor, to teach discrete skills necessary to demonstrate the replacement behavior. This table is intended to guide you through that process and help you apply your data as you plan to support the student. Data is critical in guiding our practice because it allows us to measure our progress. The Function-Based Thinking User Guide has space for you to set your SMART goals, develop strategies, and observe behavior. It also has the weekly data tracking form that you see here on the right that you can easily print and use to track student data you observe and your own implementation of the strategies you've outlined. These tools help you to support you in identifying your goals for yourself and your student as you work through function-based thinking. Additionally, the bottom of the weekly data tracking form has a link to the behavior data sheet. This is a Google sheet, and you can enter data from your paper form into this sheet and see how your behavior and your students' behavior have changed over time. You can use the Fidelity tab to enter data about the strategies you've implemented and see how they may line up with the changes in the student's behavior. And together, these tools help you to recognize trends, evaluate fidelity and success of the strategies you've tried, and to make informed adjustments to if the strategies aren't getting you to your goals. As we wrap up, let's reflect on what we've explored today. We've discussed why we collect data in the function-based thinking process. We've outlined some strategies for collecting behavior data quickly and succinctly, and what tools we can use to help the data we collect to guide our practice. As a reminder, these slides are available to you, and this video is available for you to access after the initial presentation. Before we wrap up the presentation, I want to give you a moment to reflect. What's one adjustment you're going to make to your data tracking procedures after this presentation? It could be a resource you're going to use, a new area you're going to focus on measuring, a new way you're going to organize your data, or even something you're going to ask for more help with. You can pause the video here and reflect on what you might do differently. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation today. I know data isn't always the most exciting part of our work, but I hope you came away feeling more empowered to make your data work for you and to make your job a little bit easier. Please reach out to me by email if you have questions or need help, and refer back to the Function-Based Thinking User Guide because that's where most of the resources I've talked about today can be found. Thanks so much.